the idea of service was much the same as it is today, in that individuals volunteered to serve their churches or their civic organizations or their PTAs, or even volunteered for the U.S. military. And I should hasten to add that back then, if you didn't volunteer for the U.S. military, you might get a letter from the local board inviting you to do so. But it's the delivery of service that has changed so dramatically. You want food delivered for dinner tonight? No problem. You want that book that you want to read delivered to your doorstep tomorrow? No problem. You want to talk to someone about a product or service issue? No problem. Dial the 1-800 number and go through the 6 dozen prompts and you can find somebody on the other end. You want to query a search engine about a recipe or a ball store, or find out whether Elvis is living in Southern California on an avocado ranch? No problem. And of course, everything you read on the internet is true. The Americans attacked through the blinding snowstorm, achieving total surprise, inflicting 100 casualties, taking 900 prisoners, and sending the remaining 500 Germans fleeing the field in utter and complete panic. The Americans suffer 4 wounded and no dead. The wounded and dying German commander learns that Washington is providing medical care to the German wounded and humane treatment to the German prisoners, in stark contrast to the brutal treatment his own soldiers gave the Americans in previous engagements. He thanks Washington through an interpreter. "We are not savages, sir," Washington replied. "We are Americans." So General Ryan asked me to name the single one thing that I had learned that I thought would have the most value to me going forward. Well, I hadn't expected this conversation, so I had to think for a moment, but I finally told him that I had learned about trust. That it wasn't that I had come into the Marine Corps an inherently distrustful person. I certainly trusted my family members and my close friends and my teammates from school, and most of them anyway. But I hadn't learned to trust, or at least fully trust, people that I didn't know, I didn't have any experience with, men who didn't look like me or talk like me or act like me, men who could curse with astonishing vulgarity and hysterical creativity in the same sentence, men who had killed other men in combat and were quite willing and able to do it again, and men who would offer their own trust and respect only when it had been earned. And I had indeed learned to trust my Marines, and in return had earned their trust, which created a truly special bond, one that I cherish to this day, and one that I would go on to use as a sort of model for what would be the entirety of my business career. That's the story of a great Navy Marine Corps team that's been functioning since this nation has been in existence. And it's been true that sailors and Marines have occasionally ribbed one another, well, not occasionally, incessantly ribbed one another. And there's a story of a sailor going into a bar, imagine that. He takes a seat and looks at the guy next to him and says, "Hey, you want to hear a Marine joke?" The guy next to him says, "Well, I'm 6'1", 190, I'm a Marine. The guy next to me is 6'2", 210, he's a Marine. The guy on the other side of him is 6'3", 230, and he's a Marine. Are you sure you want to tell a Marine joke?" The sailor thinks for a moment and says, forget it. I don't want to have to explain it 3 times. G.K. Chesterton said, "The true soldier fights not because he hates what is in front of him, but because he loves what is behind him." And finally, this from poet and disabled Gulf War veteran Stanley Victor Pascovich, who said, "Hopefully one day wars will only be fought in movies, and may the best producer win." Thank you very much. Thank you.